Happy Friday, Rio Verde. Dave Olm here with Dan Cutler, golf course superintendent. Hope everybody's had a great week. Obviously some weather upon us here. Might get some rain. It's been scooting back and forth all week. So hopefully we're getting some rain this weekend to kind of flush out some of the salts. And that's really our conversation today. And we're going to get some insight from Dan. You know, the salts. We're here on Quail Run. And a lot of people, as you see in the approaches and spotty areas on the golf course, you know, yellowing out. Some of the ryegrass is pretty thin. You know, Dan, so I want to kind of, let the members know what's happening on the golf course, what's causing it, and certain things that are taking place. Obviously, we know we have really bad water, right? Yep. We got our water test back here recently. We actually got a comparison against Tonto. Mm-hmm. And Dan, kind of walk through, what's that variation look like right now?
Okay, so essentially what we're getting is 3 times the rate of salt in our water comparatively to their water results. So when we get our water results back, we're getting about 2,000 pounds of salt per acre foot of water, which is about 330,000 gallons of water. So every night we irrigate, we're putting out 2,000 pounds of salt. And without anything to flush that with rain, then we're just adding salt on top of salt on top of salt, which is, it's basically poison for ryegrass. It's not ideal for ryegrass growing conditions.
Sure, and obviously doing that, what's that cause? Obviously a wet condition for us here on the golf courses. So, the next thought is, why do we have such a big variance? I think, our tests, as you said, are right in line with typically where they're at. Yep. So was there maybe a false test coming from their side?
I don't know, because they had tests coming from both golf courses. There are 2 separate tests that kind of were in line. It could have something to do with the wells and how deep the wells are going and which well is going to us and which are going to them. Mainly on White Wing, we're getting all affluent because of Quail Run. They would have to open a manual valve to give us affluent water. So it's easier for them to pump all the affluent to White Wing and then Quail Run from a well. Unfortunately, the well is no better, as you can tell. There's just as much salt in the water in the well as the affluent. Now, if they're getting better water in a well, let's say their salts are down to 100 or 1,000 pounds per acre foot, or 100, and they're mixing with the affluent, then that can also lower those numbers. So the salt is a little higher on the White Wing golf course. Bicarbonates are a little higher on the Quail Run golf course. So both are factors in reducing the health of the ryegrass.
Sure.
And a lot of factors go into what's going on too, like weather related. We just had one of the hottest summers on record in Phoenix.
Absolutely.
And then we've only had 1 inch of rain since last March 13th. So we're creeping up to a year of only 1 inch of rain. And with what that does is essentially we have nothing to flush the soils.
Yeah, and that's a good point. So we look at, the constant salt water that we're pouring onto these golf courses, and so when we go back and we're going to look at the water test, we have resubmitted water tests. We've actually reached out to EPCOR as well, right? We want to find out why our rates are so far off from our competitor and next door neighbor Tonto. So we've resubmitted those water samples over to the testing site, so we should get those back here hopefully in a couple weeks, so we can kind of see where we fall again from that standpoint.
I think a couple good points to think about is maybe putting a more salt tolerant grass in. Like, I've got people say, why don't we put Seashore Paspalum or something else that can tolerate that more heavier salt water? And really, that Seashore Paspalum is more of a summer turf. So like the Bermuda can kind of grow in anything. It'll grow in concrete. It can take that water. It's the ryegrass we're worried about. We bought the highest salt tolerant ryegrass that we could find in the market, and still, it's just the water and the effects of no rain and the drought. It's just kind of compounded our issues. We've been able to mask those issues in the past, and some of the cultural practices have helped. But with rain, especially the last 2 winters have been really wet, so conditions have been good. So the expectation has kind of been set apart. But with the drought, it's not unique to us. Everybody's battling it. I got several superintendents in town that still have some bad water, even some with good water that still have spots that I've never seen them struggle with. Another thing to think about is if we're in a 6-week stretch of it's just not good grass growing conditions.
Right.
It's cold. With no rain, heavy traffic. You got to think we basically doubled cart traffic this year as well, with the COVID situation and the social distancing. So with more carts on the golf course, the ryegrass right now is pretty dormant too. It's not really growing. We're only having to mow once a week, and we're not really getting a lot of clippings yield, and that's just a result of the grass not being able to respond to traffic because of the weather. So as we get into warmer conditions, then the grass can start to respond and kind of heal itself. If it's not actively growing in cold weather, where it's not able to keep up with the traffic, and on top of that, dealing with the stress of the salt.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Dan, that you bring up. Obviously we want to be mindful, allow social distancing, and the club is great. If you guys want to take 4 carts in a group, we ask that you just coordinate in your group. Maybe 2 carts get the odd holes, 2 carts get the even holes. Makes it easy to remember. So that only 2 carts are actually going out on the golf course on each hole each time in your foursome. So let's get to a bigger question, Dan, right? Yep. So next door neighbor, they're pulling from the same wells. Right. A lot of our men went and played the Tonto and Rio Exchange this week. Talk about the conditions over there versus our conditions, right? So right next door, let's walk through what the different practices are and why you would see such a big difference in turf conditions.
Sure. So last summer, not this most previous one, the one before, on I can't remember if it was the Peaks of the Ranch course, they did about a $500,000 project. It's called the Black Evader. So they run this thing in 5 different directions. It cuts a channel about 6 to 8 inches deep, and it fills it with sand. So now you're able to remove some of that salt from the surface. You're able to pull it down through that sand layer. It's able to break through the caliche, and you're able to drain it. So you get 2 things there. You're able to leach salt in better grass conditions, and it's going to be drier on the turf. The surface of the turf is going to be drier because now you're able to pull water out.
Right, and they didn't just channel one way, right?
No,
they had 5 directions, right? Yep. So that creates a bigger soil profile of sand to allow to leach those salts through.
This last summer they did the other golf course, so it's overall $1 million project to improve the quality of the soils. I mean, in the end, I don't know if we'll be able to affect the water source, and I think regardless of what we do, we're going to be able to improve conditions if we can top dress and aggravate and blecavate. But with the water conditions the way it is, it's just difficult to manage ryegrass in those conditions because they want to grow. When we talk about salt in the soil, a number we can talk about is electroconductivity. We can measure salt in the soil by that. And ryegrass pretty much stops. It's not healthy after when those numbers get to 4. We're in the 7 to 12 range. I mean, so that's how heavy, almost double EC that we want to see for growing ryegrass. So one way we can manage that is by top dressing, but with the continued water, with the lack of rain and then continuing to pour more salt on, it's got a negative effect on the ryegrass.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would agree that our 1/2 inch top dressing is the right practice. Absolutely. Right? We saw those results, in the last year when we didn't overseed one of the courses, left one dormant. Continuing that practice is a must. I think it's very important that we continue to change that profile. Difference is our profile change and speed of change is a lot slower process, unless we want to do blecavating and putting those kinds of dollars in. But Dan, thanks for the update. Again, we just wanted to educate the membership on what's happening on the golf courses. Obviously, we don't like to see the courses in the condition. We're doing everything we can to try to mitigate some of it, and hopefully we'll get some warm weather coming up in the next week or so after this rainfall that we're expected, and we'll start to see some changes from there. So we appreciate your time today. Obviously, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or Dan directly. Absolutely. Can get them answered for you. Again, we appreciate your support. Look forward to seeing you here at the club. Until next time, cheers.
See you on the golf course.